March 1, 1953. Moscow, Kuntsevo, the Blizhnyaya Dacha, Stalin's official country residence.
Late in the evening, a guard discovered Joseph Stalin lying on the floor of the small dining room. A few days later, on March 5th, he was dead. According to the official medical report, death resulted from a cerebral hemorrhage. However, rumors that Stalin had been poisoned began to spread through Moscow while he was still on his deathbed. Ascertaining the truth of what happened to Stalin only became possible 55 years after his passing. For a brief window, historians were granted access to archival documents, Stalin's personal medical records. Today, these files are held in the Russian State Archive in Moscow, but they have been resealed. Access will not be permitted again until 75 years after his death. At least 3 distinct medical files exist. The first, and most extensive, is folder number 1482, covering the period from March 25, 1921 to April 14, 1953. It records a wide array of ailments, from common colds and the flu to far more serious conditions. The third folder, number 1484, ends on November 9, 1953. Why these medical records conclude so long after his death remains a mystery. Naturally, these documents were handled by the Soviet state security apparatus. They contain numerous corrections and erasures. The pagination was repeatedly altered, and several pages and medical test results were removed entirely. In his book, How Stalin Was Killed, historian Nikolai Dobryuka asserts,
All claims that the cerebral hemorrhage and Stalin's rapid death were simply the result of poor health, particularly in his final years, are completely refuted by the comprehensive medical records I discovered, which cover more than 30 years of his life. Stalin was poisoned, as evidenced by these documents.
On the eve of the incident, Stalin hosted a late-night dinner for his inner circle at the Blizhnyaya Dacha, which concluded after 4 in the morning on March 1st. Khrushchev later described the scene in his memoirs.
When we, Malenkov, Beria, Khrushchev, and Bulganin, went out into the vestibule, Stalin, as usual, came out to see us off. He joked a lot and was in high spirits.
Stalin's apparent good health was also confirmed by his personal guard, Pyotr Lozgachev. After seeing his guests off, Stalin retired for the night. It was then that the irregularities began. Colonel Ivan Krustalev, head of the personal guard detail, gave an unusual order to his subordinates.
The boss, as the guards called Stalin among themselves, said, "All of you, go to sleep. I do not need anything. I am also going to bed. I will not need you today."
Lozgachev was stunned.
This was the only time the boss ever said, "Go to sleep." Usually he would ask, "Are you sleepy?" while drilling you with his eyes. Who could sleep under such a gaze? We were, of course, relieved to receive such an order, and we went to bed.
The situation was highly irregular. Stalin was famously paranoid about assassination attempts and had recently taken to locking himself in at night. Yet suddenly, he dismissed his guards. At 10 a.m., Krustalov woke his comrades, handed the shift over to the newly arrived Starostin, and left the dacha. This means that from approximately 4:30 a.m. to 10 a.m., Stalin's quarters were entirely unattended. In that window, someone could have easily entered and administered poison. Stalin typically rose between 11 a.m. and noon. He would wash, shave himself, eat a light breakfast, and depart for the Kremlin. But this time, the dictator stayed in bed. The staff assumed this was merely because it was Sunday. As the day drew to a close, the guards grew nervous. At approximately 6 p.m., as darkness fell, a light came on in Stalin's room, though no call followed. Without a direct summons from the boss, no one had the right to enter. What happened inside during those hours can only be surmised. He likely approached a table with a newspaper, where his pocket watch and 3 bottles of mineral water sat. After checking the time and drinking some water, Stalin collapsed. This occurred at approximately 6:30 p.m. His broken watch stopped at this exact moment as it fell to the floor along with the newspaper. On the table stood a glass and an open bottle of Narsan mineral water. Later, when his effects were transferred to the Stalin Museum, only 2 bottles of water were accounted for. What happened to the third bottle, the one the dictator drank from, remains unknown. At 10:30 p.m., official mail arrived from the Central Committee, the highest governing body of the Communist Party. Seizing the opportunity, Lozgachev entered the room with the documents. Upon entering the small dining room, he found the boss lying on the floor near the table. Stalin was conscious but had lost the power of speech. Paralysis had not yet set in. According to Lozgachev, Stalin was signaling for help specifically with his right hand. Stalin had been lying there in his undergarments for quite some time, was severely chilled, and had wet himself. 3 other guards rushed in at Lozgachev's call. Together, they carried the stricken leader into the large hall, changed his clothes, placed him on a sofa, and covered him with a blanket. The guards contacted Beria, and at 3 a.m. on March 2nd, he arrived at the dacha along with Malenkov, Bulganin, and Khrushchev. Doctors were not summoned to the scene until 9 a.m. on March 2nd. By the time he received any medical assistance, Stalin had been lying helpless for at least 14 hours. Historian Nikolai Dobryuka concluded that Stalin was poisoned, citing evidence found in his medical records. Central to these documents are the logbook recording events from March 2nd to March 5th, and the official autopsy report. The heavily crossed-out, rough drafts of medical notes are of particular importance. Judging by these documents, the doctors treating Stalin understood that they were dealing with a case of poisoning. Consequently, the medical prescriptions included nearly every treatment typically used to treat poisoning: sweet tea with lemon, cold compresses on the head, and stomach cleansing with magnesium sulfate. On the night of March 5th, the results of Stalin's blood and urine tests arrived. The blood work showed a white blood cell count of 21, with toxic granulation of neutrophils. The neutrophil count itself had risen to 85%. This is primary evidence of the presence of toxins in the body. Notably, this indicator on the form is heavily underlined with a blue pencil. The results of the medical tests pointed to one unambiguous conclusion: poisoning. According to modern specialists, toxic substances of this nature are found in the venom of snakes and spiders and in curare-like plants. Furthermore, Stalin suffered from persistent nausea from March 1st to March 5th. On the morning of March 5th, he began vomiting blood, a symptom that does not fit the clinical picture of a stroke. Most significantly, this vomit was never sent for laboratory analysis. The autopsy failed to confirm the diagnosis of focal pneumonia, which had supposedly caused the high fever and elevated white blood cell count. However, it did reveal an abnormal condition of the gastrointestinal tract, a condition that only occurs with severe poisoning. The final autopsy report was signed by only 11 of the 19 attending experts. Among those who refused to sign was Professor Rusakov, who personally participated in the autopsy. He explicitly stated that it was a case of poisoning and wrote a memorandum to the head of the Kremlin's Medical and Sanitary Directorate. 1 month later, Professor Rusakov was dead. The final medical report on Stalin's illness and death was compiled by Professor Lukomsky. The document was repeatedly revised. Its fourth and final version, spanning 20 typewritten pages, was eventually signed by the entire medical council. This report is undated, but it was printed from a draft dated July 1953, 4 months after Stalin's death. This delay alone raises serious doubts about its complete authenticity. The political landscape within the Soviet leadership during the second half of 1952 provides clear insight into who stood to benefit from Stalin's removal. Facing old age and a declining capacity for work, Stalin began preparing to transfer power to a new generation of appointees. His plan involved 2 primary successors: Mikhail Suslov to lead the Communist Party and Panteleimon Ponomarenko to head the Soviet government. In fact, prior to Stalin's death, A decree for Ponomarenko's appointment had already been endorsed by several senior members of the Politburo. This was later confirmed by Ivan Benediktov, who served as Stalin's Minister of Agriculture. In October 1952, the 19th Party Congress took place. At Stalin's instigation, the Politburo was abolished and replaced by an expanded Presidium of the Central Committee. Stalin proposed a massive expansion, 25 full members and 11 candidate members. It became obvious that these new appointees were meant to replace his longtime associates. This reorganization shocked and alarmed Stalin's inner circle, specifically Beria, Malenkov, and Khrushchev. Stalin's removal became inevitable. As historian Edvard Redzinski noted,
They were all doomed. They had no choice but to kill.
an assassination attempt would have been impossible without the cooperation of the Soviet security services and insiders within Stalin's personal guard. Consequently, only Beria, who maintained profound influence over the security apparatus, could have orchestrated the murder. Furthermore, Beria himself faced the imminent threat of arrest and likely execution. In late 1951, on Stalin's personal orders, a political investigation known as the Mingrelian Affair was launched, specifically targeting Lavrentiy Beria. The trial was scheduled for April 1953. It was expected that Beria would be formally accused as the mastermind behind the conspiracy. However, immediately following Stalin's death, the case was closed and the defendants were exonerated. Beria himself made little effort to hide his involvement. On May 1, 1953, while standing atop Lenin's mausoleum during the May Day demonstration, he spoke to Molotov loudly enough for Khrushchev and Malenkov to overhear.
I saved you all. I removed him just in time.
Malenkov was almost certainly aware of Beria's plans. Although the assassination did not go exactly as intended, Malenkov remained confident that Stalin would not survive and acted in full alignment with Beria. Stalin was likely meant to die instantly, but the plan was disrupted and he clung to life. This terrified Beria. When he and Malenkov arrived at the dacha on the night of March 2nd and found Stalin asleep, Beria harshly reprimanded the guard officer, Lozgachev, for raising a needless alarm. He demanded that they not be disturbed again, insisting they not trouble Comrade Stalin. Malenkov and Beria then departed without ever summoning medical aid. Nevertheless, that very morning, Malenkov convened an emergency meeting of the Central Committee Presidium in Stalin's Kremlin office. The redistribution of power had begun. On the morning of March 3rd, a second emergency meeting was held. At this session, Beria and Malenkov's proposal for a total reorganization of the party and state leadership was unanimously approved, an act that effectively constituted a coup d'état. Malenkov was appointed chairman of the Council of Ministers, replacing the still-living Stalin, who had never been formally removed from the post. For a brief period, the country technically had two prime ministers. Beria took the post of Minister of Internal Affairs, into which the Ministry of State Security was immediately merged. Thus, all control over the state security apparatus was concentrated in Beria's hands. On March 4th, the final emergency meeting of the Presidium took place. It was decided to reduce its membership to just 11 people. Every one of Stalin's new appointees, whom he had introduced at the 19th Party Congress in October 1952, was removed, including Suslov and Ponomarenko. In effect, the leadership reverted to the previous Politburo and its original composition. Every structural change Stalin had made just months earlier was systematically reversed. On the evening of March 5th, a joint session of the highest party and government leadership took place to ratify all previous resolutions. The coup was complete. Barely an hour after the session concluded, Stalin died. A pivotal role in this entire drama belongs to the senior guard, Ivan Khrushchev. Stalin's daughter, Svetlana Alliluyeva, recalled the exact moment of her father's death in her memoirs.
Beria was the first to rush into the corridor. In the silence of the hall, where everyone stood speechless, his voice rang out, unable to conceal his triumph. "Khrushchev, my car!"
This final command makes it clear. Khrushchev was Beria's man. By a striking coincidence, It was Khrushchev who was the last person to see Stalin in good health. It was Khrushchev who sent the guards to bed, an unprecedented order. And most tellingly, all of Stalin's medical tests following the suspected poisoning were submitted under Khrushchev's name. Could Khrushchev have been directly involved in the murder? It is certainly possible, though definitive proof remains elusive. However, the circumstances of Khrushchev's own death are riddled with contradictions. Yuri Solovyov, a guard who served under Khrushchev for 10 years, asserted that Khrushchev died shortly after Stalin's funeral. Yet, official documents from the Ministry of State Security state that the 46-year-old Khrushchev was discharged and transferred to the reserves on May 29, 1953, and lived until December 23, 1954. To complicate matters further, historian Ivan Chigirin, in his book, Father, The Mystery of Stalin's Death, claims to have found Khrushchev's grave, with the date of death marked as September 22, 1954. The records are deeply inconsistent. Exactly when Khrushchev died remains unknown, but one thing is certain: he knew too much. If Khrushchev did indeed die shortly after Stalin's funeral, as Solovyov maintains, it is vital to determine his cause of death. If he exhibited the same symptoms as Stalin, it would serve as compelling evidence of his involvement in the leader's assassination.